Hi and welcome to Terry Talks Movies. This time around we're doing more hidden gems of cinema. I'm covering the letters U and V in the alphabet. The next one's going to be W, X, Y and Z. But for this time around I've got 10 movies, 5 from each letter, which I consider hidden gems or at least worth checking out. We'll start with one of my favourite movies of all time. From 1964, Jacques Demy's The Umbrellas of Cherbourg. If you haven't seen this movie, you should. If you're having a date night with your partner, this is the GOAT. This is the one you want to see. It stars Catherine Deneuve and Nino Castelnuovo, and it's the story of a young girl whose mother runs an umbrella shop. She falls in love with a mechanic played by Nino Castelnuovo, and he gets conscripted to go and fight the war in Algeria. She finds out after he's left that she's pregnant, and she then marries another guy, and they meet years later for one brief, beautiful moment. Now, this movie is unusual because all the dialogue in the film is sung. The music is written by Michel Legrand, so it's fantastic music, but all of the dialogue is sung in French. That's a little bit of a barrier for some people, but not for all of us. And it's just beautifully shot, the beautiful pastel colors. It ends on such a wonderful grace note that you can't help but fall in love with it. It's one of my favorite films. It's one of my top 3 or 4 favorite musicals. And you should check that one out because it is extraordinarily beautiful, as indeed was Catherine Deneuve at the time, though some of her political opinions in recent years haven't been quite as nuanced, let's say. Next one I've got is part of a trilogy, but it's the best of the 3 and it's the first of the 3. Now, there have been many movie series that the first movie was the best one. The original Planet of the Apes movies, for instance, but in this one there were 3 movies, all written and directed by M. Night Shyamalan. And from 2000, Unbreakable is the best of the 3. Bruce Willis plays a guy called David Dunn, who survives an unsurvivable train accident. He is unbreakable in that sense and has superhuman strength and resilience. He is then contrasted with a guy who calls himself Mr. Glass, played by Samuel L. Jackson, who has brittle bone syndrome. He's the opposite of David Dunn. And they come into conflict, and the complexities of David Dunn's life, where his wife, played by Robin Wright, has some problems with him, and his son, who thinks that David's a superhero, does some incredibly dangerous things at one stage. It's a solid movie, and it's a superhero movie that doesn't play like other superhero narratives do. It goes its own path, and as I've said before, like westerns, I think superhero narratives are such a wide concept that you can do all kinds of different movies with them. And people talk about superhero fatigue, but I think what we've seen too much of, and the reason we have superhero fatigue, is the same kinds of stories with the same plot beats are continually being made because a lot of them made a lot of money. This one's different. This one's an outlier. I'm going to rewatch the trilogy of these films at some stage and perhaps do a video on why I think those 3 are of decreasing value. But Unbreakable, definitely one to watch. Then we zip over to horror, and this one's Beyond Genres. It's one of the Umbrella Beyond Genres movies, Volume 12, an Australian zombie movie from 2003, Undead, directed and written by the Sperrig brothers. Good, solid zombie movie, and it's a bit different. It was made on a low budget. In fact, all of the special effects were done on a laptop for this film and took endless time to render. Meteorites crash in a small town called Berkeley in Queensland, and the bombardment causes zombies to emerge. Now, there are some really interesting twists in this one. There's one twist where you go, what the hell's happening? And another twist which explains everything that happens. The Sperrig brothers went on to do many other things. They did Daybreakers, they did Predestination. Solid filmmakers, and this is where they started. And the coolest thing about it is, apart from the fact that this is an all-region disc, triple shotgun. Gotta love a triple shotgun. Rewatchable, a good, solid Australian horror movie. Now, this one, people told me to watch, and I thought, why would I? It doesn't seem like my kind of film. But it turns out it is. Written and directed by David Robert Mitchell, who did It Follows, a really good horror movie from a number of years ago. This was from 2017. Under the Silver Lake. This is about a screenwriter played by Andrew Garfield who's not particularly successful. He's on the fringes of Hollywood. He gets invites to Hollywood parties. He's trying to make a living. He's trying to make things work for him. And as the movie progresses, he finds that there's a cult of extremely rich people doing weird things in and under Hollywood and Los Angeles. It's a crazy film. It has some really what the hell happening moments. Slightly David Lynchian without being full-on Lynchian, and a lot of fun. There's your back cover, and I've got to get that to the light. But this one surprised me because I like what it does. Beautiful locations in and around Los Angeles. And it's one of those movies where you don't know where it's going from one moment to the next, but it does have a thematic and plot consistency and resolves the plot in an interesting way. Andrew Garfield's very good in this one too. Also stars Riley Keough and a whole bunch of other people. Topher Grace is in there and a number of other I know that face kind of people. You should check that one out. The last one in the news is a Sam Fuller movie from 1961 starring Cliff Robertson, done on a small budget on a really interesting sets that I think were left over from the Untouchables TV series. It's a crime drama with a mad criminal played by Cliff Robertson. Underworld U.S.A. You should check this one out. It's a solid Sam Fuller, ripped from the headlines kind of crime drama. It works really well. This is an all-region disc from Indicator. Tons of good extras. Lots of analysis of it as a very late film noir. This one you should check out. Cliff Robertson is an actor who could be really good or could be not really good. And the weird thing is that the role he got an Academy Award for in Charlie, playing an intellectually disabled guy who gets a boost in intelligence, is one of his lesser roles for me as far as his acting is concerned. And this one is much better from that point of view. I've got a number of Sam Fuller movies, things like Shock Corridor and The Naked Kiss, and I picked up Underworld U.S.A. late in my arc of enjoying the movies of Sam Fuller, and it's one that I recommend. Time to move on to the V's. This one I already watched last night and I loved it. I think it works well. I think it's a solid piece of 1970s existential action cinema, directed by Richard C. Sarafian, starring Barry Newman, Cleavon Little, and Dean Jagger. Vanishing Point. I watched this again last night, and it is fantastic. Barry Newman plays a guy called Kowalski who's delivering a car from Chicago to Los Angeles, and it's a 1970 Dodge Challenger RT, and he's traveling across the desert, gets in trouble with the cops, outraces the cops, outthinks the cops, and meets a whole bunch of interesting people on the way. Cleavon Little plays a DJ in one of these towns called Super Soul, who is giving advice to Kowalski on how to avoid the cops up until a certain point when some people take umbrage at him doing that. He has an almost telepathic link to Kowalski. And we meet a whole bunch of weird and wonderful people. You got Dean Jagger playing a guy who collects rattlesnakes for a living and gives them to an evangelical church. We've got a couple of hippies, one of whom is played by an actress called Gilda Texter, who rides a motorcycle naked across the desert. In fact, that image of her riding this motorcycle naked was a poster that was very popular when I was very young in the 1970s. But Vanishing Point, I love. Carrie Lofton did the stunt work on this, and it's on point. And it was filmed in Colorado, Utah, Nevada, and California. And it has a lot of the similarities thematically with Easy Rider. It came a couple of years after Easy Rider. It's got that beautiful photography of using local people from the towns in which it was filmed. So you see them staring through the windows of stores, watching things happen. It's got that kind of lived in, these people are creepy and I don't trust them kind of feel about it. This version has the additional footage of Charlotte Rampling playing a hitchhiker. And I like that extra footage. It's from the English version of the film. And Charlotte Rampling is a hitchhiker who Kowalski picks up. And it's right near the end of the film. So there's a question raised on whether she's a hallucination or whether she's in some form an angel of death. And that makes it really interesting. I think that inclusion adds a grace note at the end of the movie when Kowalski, who is hyped up on speed, is really starting to lose it as he's outrunning the cops across the deserts of Western America. Great film, a lot of fun to revisit, and I will watch it again. This one's a science fiction movie from 2017, and even though the stars have no chemistry at all, I love the world building. I don't like the director. I think he's a piece of shit as a human being, but I love the world building. I like the aliens in it. I like the whole mise en scène of Valerian and the City of 1,000 Worlds. It's great, fun science fiction, and Cara Delevingne and Dane DeHaan just don't merge well together as the two leads, and I don't think either of them was playing their A game as actors for it as well. Clive Owen plays the big bad in this, but there are some beautiful scenes of, first off, an alien planet which gets impacted by a large warship from space which destroys the whole civilization and they become refugees. And there's also a montage of the history of the International Space Station as it becomes a truly international space station, and then first contact is made with a number of alien species, all done to the tune of David Bowie's Space Odyssey. I think it's underrated. I think that there's things wrong with it, but it's still a hidden gem of cinema, and I like it a lot for that. Next up is a Christmas movie. I'm not a Christmas guy because I'm not a Christian. I like the time off. I like the food of Christmas. I like getting together with family and friends. I like all of that end of year stuff, which is particularly good here in Australia because we get to do it in summertime. We don't have to worry about hypothermia at the time of year when we're with our nearest and dearest. We can have barbecues and go swimming. All the good things we can do at Christmas. And this is one of my 2 or 3 favourite Christmas movies apart from Die Hard. A very Harold and Kumar Christmas with Cal Penn and John Cho playing the titular characters, Neil Patrick Harris playing a version of himself. This is a stoner comedy with a heart, as indeed was White Castle and Go to Guantanamo, the other 2 movies in the series. And this one totally takes the piss out of over-the-top Christmas stuff. They even have a scene where the guys take drugs and think that they're claymation, so you get a claymation sequence harking back to the Rankin Bass Christmas movies. This is a lot of fun. You got Danny Trejo wearing a Christmas sweater. Ends the series really nicely for these characters. A lot of stoner comedies aren't kind movies. They're not inclusive. They're not wonderful. They're very much in your face without having any redeeming, heartfelt stuff in them. This one does. And I like what it does. There's an over-the-top Broadway production number starring Neil Patrick Harris, which totally mocks the saccharine sweetness of commercialised, Disneyized Christmas. It's a bit of an underrated one, that one. Second Last Victim, 1955, directed by Richard Fleischer. Great cast in this one. Good, solid, rural crime drama in America. Violent Saturday, with Victor Mature, Stephen McNally, Richard Egan. You've also got Ernest Borgnine and Lee Marvin in this. Ernest Borgnine plays an Amish farmer, and it's the usual story of a bunch of criminals come to town to rob the bank. Things go wrong, they take hostages, they have to kind of deal with that. There's a really good booklet in this one as well, with a ton of information about the movie. It's shot in CinemaScope, and there are a whole bunch of 1950s CinemaScope shot in the desert in mining town crime movies. Things like Edge of Eternity with Cornel Wilde and A Kiss Before Dying, the first version with Robert Wagner. Violent Saturday you should check out, and the Eureka edition, which is Region B, has just so many extras in it. It's fantastic to watch and a high recommendation from me. That then brings us to one of the first Russian horror movies. Russia wasn't big on horror movies, and this one was made in 1967, and it's widely known as the first Russian horror movie, based on Nikolai Gogol's story, V, which is the story of a young seminary student. He's an adult, but he's a seminary student, who is forced to spend 3 nights with the corpse of a young witch in a church before burial can occur. And the witch rises from the dead every night and tries to seduce him. And ultimately there's a much larger demon. This one is shot beautifully. It's in 1.37 to 1 aspect ratio, so it's Academy ratio. But it is scary as hell. It shows us a culture that not everybody who watches movies that I know is familiar with. The horror sequences are fantastically well done. It has beautiful color cinematography. It's creepy as hell. There was a remake of this in 2014 starring Jason Fleming, which is, I hear, not anywhere near as good as this. This original version is the one you want. There's a really nice image from it. There's the back image. Again, you get a booklet which contextualizes the movie because it is from a culture with which a lot of people aren't familiar. If you collect horror movies, this is one to go with. It has a bit of the feels of a Mario Bava horror movie from the 1960s. But V is a fantastic film you should have in your collection and you should watch because it's scary as hell, it's very different, and it's a high recommend from me. So that's it for this time around. Thanks a lot for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like, subscribe, and leave a comment and hit the notification bell. You can financially support the channel two ways by, first off, becoming a channel member, and there's a link in the description of the video on how to do that. Or else you can become a Patreon supporter at patreon.com/terrytalksmovies, and there are extras that you get for that. Next time around, I've got some imprint biovision things that are really interesting I'm going to review. Then we've got Science Fiction Saturday rolling up again, and I've got a big list now of science fiction movies I want to talk about on the channel on Science Fiction Saturdays. So until then, watch some good movies, watch some bad movies, watch some outrageous horror movies, and I'll catch you next time.